Hey, welcome to lab number two. Lab number two is all about regions of the body, which we're going to see on the outside, so things that are superficial, plus cavities within the body. All right, so if you look at this guy here, he's standing in an anatomical position, and there are a lot of different regions that are named. This is all part of anatomy here. This is part of learning the structure of the human body. And naming regions plays an important role. It tells us where things are. We can talk about what we find in these different regions. This is actually not all the regions, the list we have here. It's not everything. So, let's get started. Start with orbital. So, orbital refers to the eye. All right? Easy. Neighboring the eye, we've got the cheek. The cheek is referred to by the word buccal. Going down a little bit, we've got the mouth, which of course would be oral. Then we got our neck here. The neck would be cervical. Then to the side of the neck, we got our shoulder. The shoulder is the deltoid region because the muscle there looks kind of like a triangle, which is Greek letter delta. Our upper arm, all right, so from our shoulder to our elbow, basically, that is brachial. Then the front part of the elbow, where a stethoscope might go during a blood pressure reading, where a venipuncture might occur when blood is being withdrawn, that's antecubital. Then our fingers here, and our toes are going to be digital. All right, chest, pectoral. In the middle of the chest, we've got the sternal region. Then we got our abdominal region, which includes the umbilical. Down below, where the thigh meets the trunk, that would be the inguinal region. Inguinal means groin. Then where the genitalia are, that would be pubic. All right, a couple more here in this pic. We got the femoral region here, the thigh. The front of the knee is patellar. And then we had digital again. All right, a couple more in the back. In the back, we see the back of the head, occipital. We have the neck again, which is cervical. We see the lower back, which is lumbar. Then right at kind of the top of the butt, right above the cleft between the two butt cheeks, that's the sacral region. Then we got our femoral again. We see digits again. We also see the back of the knee. The back of the knee is the popliteal region. And we see the bottom of the foot, which is the plantar region. Okay, cool. That's body regions. Now we got to do body cavities. There are two major body cavities. One is in the front, one is in the back. Here we have, colored in yellow, the one in the back. Because it's in the back, it is the dorsal body cavity. It's got two parts. The cranial cavity, which of course is where your brain is, and the vertebral cavity, which is where your spinal cord is. Note that these two guys are continuous. All right, this dorsal body cavity, the cranial and vertebral cavity, are lined by these membranes called meninges. If you've heard of meningitis, that's inflammation of the meninges. Okay, what about the front? Well, the front is going to be the ventral body cavity, which I actually don't have written down here. I probably should. It's colored in red. It is the ventral body cavity. All right, it's got several different parts. Up here above this big muscle here, above this big muscle is your diaphragm, and above it, in our chest, basically, we've got our thoracic cavity. Below that, we've got our entire abdominopelvic cavity, which we can partition into an abdominal and a pelvic portion. They're continuous, there's no separation there. Just helpful to do it because there's different things. The abdominal cavity is where we're going to have a lot of your digestive organs, both intestines, your stomach, your pancreas, your liver, your gallbladder, your spleen, etc. Pelvic cavity, got more of the urinary organs and reproductive organs down there. Okay, let's break things up even more. If we look at our thoracic cavity, there's actually a pleural cavity on the left and a pleural cavity on the right. And I totally just did that backwards. On the left and on the right. And the pleural cavities are right next to the lungs. In between the pleural cavity, this entire region in here is called the mediastinum. Up here we got our superior mediastinum, where our trachea would be coming down, our esophagus, big blood vessels in there too. Then below that, in the inferior part of the mediastinum, we find the pericardial cavity, which is right next to the heart. So pleural cavity next to the lungs, pericardial next to the heart. Notice I did not say that those organs were in those cavities. They're just next to them or associated with them. That'll become more clear later on. All right, got our abdominal pelvic cavity here. Okay, and which is kind of got a little messed up over here. We got our abdominal portion just below the diaphragm. Down here we got our pelvic portion. We mentioned those a moment ago. Okay, here we see the heart. The heart is being enclosed by a double membrane. This double membrane is called the pericardium. All right, it's kind of analogous to a fist punching into a balloon. The fist here isn't actually in between the two layers of the balloon, but there is a part of the balloon here against the fist, then there's some air, and then there's a part of the balloon right here. Okay, so this is what's going on with our heart here. This inner line just against the heart is a membrane called the Visceral Pericardium. Then just outside of it, this line here is a membrane called the Parietal Pericardium. And the tiny little space in there is called the pericardial cavity. It contains fluid called pericardial fluid, which the purpose of that is to reduce friction as the heart fills up and contracts. Okay, there we go. Went too far. Getting too excited here. Similarly, the lungs. Here we have a lung. Each lung is associated with a double membrane. Directly on the lung, we have this purple line here. This represents a membrane called the Visceral Pleura. Now, just outside of that, we have another membrane in the light blue here. This is the Parietal Pleura. And the tiny little space in between them, which is exaggerated in here, the tiny little space in here is called the pleural cavity. And again, the lung isn't in the pleural cavity, but fluid is, pleural fluid. And by the way, all these fluids that I'm mentioning right now are known as serous fluids. So these membranes are sometimes generally called serous membranes. Now notice we're going to have two distinct, separate pleural cavities. That's great. If one gets damaged, the other will be okay. All right, last thing. In the abdomen, we have another similar situation. For example, here is the liver. There is a membrane on the liver. The membrane on the liver here is the visceral peritoneum. The membrane on the stomach here is the visceral peritoneum. Then the membrane, the green one right here, this green one right here is the parietal peritoneum. The parietal peritoneum. And the space in between them, the space in here is the peritoneal cavity, which would contain fluid. Now we do see some connections between these guys. These connections are known as mesenteries. So there's a lot of organs here. They got to be connected to one another and held in place. And mesenteries do that. You're going to build a model of this in lab with some tape and a lima bean. And that is it. See you next time.